Hey everyone, before we get to this week's show, this is just your weekly reminder to please continue to pray for my wife, Lindsay. She is battling breast cancer right now, and we're praying for complete healing in Jesus' name. Thank you.
I do believe that when it says that there are these angels that appear before men, and so it just kind of starts you down this path of just thinking, maybe these two topics may not be separated. When people say, do you believe, have you changed your views? I have done an extensive amount of research in this. I do think that we're tracking some stuff down. I used to think that demons and fallen angels and unclean spirits were synonymous, that they were the same thing. But I've learned that there is a distinction between those different classifications. I've spoken with some people that they pray to God and to Jesus, and that they are born again Christian, and that on a regular basis that they do see phenomenon, that they see UFOs and make a display or some kind of presence. And I've also heard stories of people that are not believers who do the exact same thing.
There's a whole mass amount of deception that gets thrown into the pot here when we're dabbling with the idea of calling in spiritual entities. And I believe that's what's happening right now.
Culturally, this is becoming more and more of a topic. And it almost makes you wonder, are we entering like a quickening phase here? Are we entering into like a point of acceleration? Because it certainly feels like there's an acceleration of this that's occurring.
All right, today we have Congressman Burlison on the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Good to see you. It's been a while.
I'm glad you're here. Yeah, it's been a little bit. I ran into you at Tim Pool's. Should we call it a compound? I don't know what to call it.
I don't know what to call it either. It was awesome though. It was like a man's paradise.
It really was. I mean, the green room itself was kind of like a real relaxed area. And that whole trip for me was like a last minute thing. I think Tim Alberino was originally supposed to be on, and he had popped off and he had something else to do, I guess. And so I filled in. And so I text Tim and I said, hey, cancel more often. You know, I welcome the opportunity. So it was really cool meeting you, and we got to share an Uber ride back, and we got to know each other a bit more. And you had mentioned about coming on the show. The way we're connected is the topics we discuss on the show, and you're also part of the whole disclosure thing in the government. And I'd like, before we kind of dive into that stuff, I'd like to kind of maybe lay some groundwork, because is this something that you fell into, or was it like always a fascination interest of yours? Like, how does somebody get involved in government disclosure, and is it like a prereq that you were always interested in these topics, or was it something that was maybe more deeper for you?
I would say I grew up a child of the '80s. Big fan of all the sci-fi. And whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Firefly, I always love that kind of stuff. Even I love the X-Files, but I never kind of crossed the Rubicon to think that this is actually real. To me, it was always science fiction. So I really didn't get into conspiracy theories, and I really wasn't involved until I got into Congress, and I was on the oversight committee, and we basically started having hearings. And I'll tell you, like, the more that we go through this, I really kind of play, and I am the skeptic in the room, and I try to be as skeptical as I possibly can. But I'll tell you, like, the one thing that I've become consistently aware of, and I hope that your viewers are, is that we do have a federal government that has been lying to us. We have a federal government that's been lying to us. What's clear, for example, with the JFK files that are now becoming disclosed, we're learning more and more that the CIA was lying. Multiple directors of the CIA lied to Congress. We also know that they just recently, with all the files that have come out about Russiagate, there's a huge lie that was spread by our deep state and a cover up that's been occurring ever since. So this has me involved because I'm on the oversight committee, and so I just am trying to do my part, be diligent about it, and take it very seriously.
Yeah, and I'm glad that there are people like you who are taking it seriously. I know there's several others that are, and on my end of things, it went from my understandings of all this stuff from 10 years ago, went from I don't know to I think that this might be a deeply spiritual thing. And I know there's these thoughts going around, and I know others in Congress have mentioned such things. As somebody who plays the skeptic role, but you are a Christian, how does this whole agenda of disclosure play into how you even view your faith, and has it affected your faith?
Yeah, I would say the fundamentals of my faith have not changed. If anything, it's given me a little bit of a flavor as to what I used to read as a kid, growing up, what we all read in Sunday school, some of these stories. And you go back and you kind of look at them through a different lens. So for me, for example, after the hearing that we had with David Grush, when he came forward as the whistleblower, I had a friend of mine who's a Christian. We go to church together. He reached out, when we were talking, he said, "Hey, I heard people talk about you on a podcast, um, and it was the Blurry Preacher podcast. I'd never heard of this podcast. Not to drop one of your, well, I
No, they're
think they're your
friends.
friends, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I was just at their studio.
what was intriguing is that the way he put it is that it's from a Christian worldview, and so I decided, I said, send me the link. I listened to the podcast, and it really kind of took me down a rabbit hole of just kind of questioning. Okay, yes, I do believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God. I do believe that when it says that there are these angels that appear before men, that they're not human, they're not of this earth. And so it just kind of starts you down this path of just thinking, maybe, these two topics may not be separated. But at the end of the day, in my role in Congress, I try to kind of put that aside and really focus on the physical material facts that I can investigate. And so
Mm.
to me, when people say, "Do you believe? Have you changed your views?" I have done an extensive amount of research in this. I've taken trips to other countries. I've taken a lot of trips. I will be taking more trips this August to investigate this phenomenon. And so far, I have not come up with anything, but I do think that we're tracking some stuff down.
So you mentioned about the government lying to us, and on the surface, I mean, how hard was it to go through some of these hearings and come to the realization that it's not even an assumption? Like, I mean, I don't know what your assumptions were going into politics, but like you get to a point where it's kind of like other things that have happened over the last several years where it comes to a point where the rubber meets the road, and you can say things all you want, and you can say, "Oh, I think this, I think that," but when you're faced with the reality and stuff, it does something to you. What was there a moment for you that like you went from assuming, yeah, I think they're lying, and maybe it's for our protection, to, oh, this was sinister?
Yeah, I think, for example, the first time that I knew that we had confirmation that we were being lied to is that when we had David Grush give his testimony. Some of his testimony included some key facts that we could investigate, and one that was um, that these special access programs are being overly compartmentalized, that they're using a loophole that allows for them to operate without providing any disclosure to Congress. But he still believed that they were violating the law in that regard. And so when we sat down with the Office of Inspector General, of both the Department of Defense, and then a later meeting, and all of these were done in a SCIF in a secure setting, in a later meeting with the Office of Inspector General for the intelligence community, they both confirmed that aspect, that there are special access programs, and that they themselves had a very difficult time even getting answers from those programs, which is not acceptable, and is not following the law. So that was confirmation of a few things that Grush had said. And so if you set aside the fantastical things that he had said about, there being biologics and that there's crash retrievals, that we have possession of some of these crash retrievals, if you set that aside, it still, for me, was worth investigating the fact that we potentially have agencies that have gone rogue, that are not reporting to Congress. And I strongly believe, as a conservative, who, when I say conservative, a lot of people throw that word around, but what I believe that for me, what it means is, I'm my job, my duty is to conserve the principles that our founding fathers and our nation were derived upon. And those are that your rights, uh, your your purpose in life, everything is given to you by God, and that men institute government to protect those rights. So when we have a deep state that is not that has no responsibility, and is rogue, it's not fulfilling the original intent of this government. And so that's why I feel like I have a very strong sense. Now, what has been more obvious has been the JFK investigation, because we've had two hearings on this, and at first, I'll tell you, I used to believe that it was all silly. The original conspiracies about there being a second shooter or a third shooter, and I've come to the conclusion that there's one thing you cannot deny, and that is that the CIA was a lot more involved with Lee Harvey Oswald than they let up. They were intimately involved in his life, and they have been lying about it for over 70 years.
So, all right. On that note, the CIA being involved with Lee Harvey Oswald, this is something that happened before most of, like, you and I were born, and we have the CIA operating today. The people who are responsible for that incident aren't involved today. On the very surface level, for people that maybe are, I don't know, is sitting on the fence with this stuff, why should they care about an old sinister act that the CIA, and listen, it's terrible. We lost a president through it, but why should they care in 2025 what happened back then? Where should we be drawing the bridge from then to current times?
Yeah, I think that if you're asking how we draw that to current times, I think that the fact, if they were able to do this and pull this off in the 1960s, you know, what are they doing to us today? And I think that this Russiagate is good evidence of the fact that we have a deep state that is willing to lie to the American people, that to create false narratives and try to push them through the press. This is a disturbing fact, and it's something that I think that people need to be held accountable for. If we're going to allow this to happen, and people are not going to be prosecuted, and they're not going to lose their, or at least lose their pensions, um, lose their jobs, I think we owe it to the American people to prosecute these individuals, to investigate them.
Yeah, and with these organizations still operating, CIA then, CIA now. I mean, as somebody who just doesn't really, I don't know what the use is if for them, if they're going to be acting outside the law itself. We talk a lot about revamping things and big changes from the inside. As somebody who's on the inside of all this, what's the realistic chance that even that can even happen? The idea of, I don't want to go as extreme as like getting rid of the CIA, because I feel like that's just like impossible. But like, what are the realistic changes that you think could actually happen through this kind of disclosure of understanding what the history is here with some of these organizations?
Yeah, I think that the question is really, what will the public do? Will there be enough of a public outcry to demand change from Congress? And I'll give you a perfect example. We had an opportunity, every 2 years we have an opportunity to renew the FISA. FISA is the way Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It was originally created as a way for our intelligence community to spy on foreigners and their communications, their emails, their telephone calls. This has bled over to American citizens. In fact, it was determined that the FBI inappropriately used FISA like 270,000 times. that they illegally use FISA to spy on U.S. citizens. So this is a big deal, and so Congress, when we went to renew the FISA authority, Warren Davidson, J- uh, Jim Jordan, a lot of conservatives, we all fought for. In fact, Mike Johnson, the current speaker, supported putting a warrant requirement in FISA so that if you're going to search on a U.S. citizen, you have to, just like they're going to search your property or search your records, they have to get a warrant. We were trying to put that into the FISA reauthorization, and it was blocked by just a small handful of people. If there's enough political will, we can overcome some of that. And so I do think that that topic is going to come back up in the next couple of years, but we need structural changes within the intelligence community that kind of create a leash or create guardrails so that they can't run amok.
Yeah, I think what you're describing seems like a multifaceted thing that needs to happen, because like you're talking about building out structure so things can't happen, but within that there needs to be built out structure publicly so that people feel like they have their voice again. Because I think there's a lot of people who just feel like it's always the same old thing, and I feel like the American public feels like its voice has, because you mentioned about the outcry of the public. I feel like a lot of the public feels like that their voice is just gone. It doesn't matter. They're just screaming into an empty room. And so I think the taking ideas and then building out the structure publicly so people can see how the structure is being built should hopefully empower the American people, that they have that voice. Because I know you agree that the government works for the people, but for the longest time, the people felt like the government is their boss, their owners. And there's a whole generation of people who grew up in a world that are adults now that were born after 9/11, when the world changed, our country changed, policies changed. And that was a big point in time where it was a shift psychologically in our country. And there's adults in this world who they're making votes and they're making decisions that do not understand what this world that we live in this country should be like compared to what it is now. So I think the transparency of building out that structure is going to be a huge piece.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be, and we're just going to need the American people to wake up and to realize that, to your point, it wasn't always this way. There have been moments where we've had people have had more authority over their government, more freedom, and we cannot. Every generation has to fight for that.
I agree. So making a turn here back to the UAP topic, I talk to a lot of people who have their own experiences with UAPs, and every once in a while, I've had people on the show who detail a detailed experience of a run-in with one of these things from military's perspective, and not just as somebody who was former military, but while they were in service, they had this interaction. And I would like to run one by you, maybe even a second one if we have time, because as far as I know, both these men have not testified before our government on these things. One is a very public person, and one, honestly, he asked me not to release his full name years ago. But his story has lined up dramatically to what we're hearing today, and he told me this back in 2019. But I talked to a guy named Ryan Pote, and I can name drop him because he's out there publicly talking to people about a book that he wrote. And ultimately, he was on some kind of I guess drug bust of a drug run, and he was in a helicopter, and he was using some kind of radar device or some kind of night vision sensing thing, and they came up on these two boats that were doing this drug run, and they busted up and they started chasing after one of the boats. And he said that what they thought was a boat that they were chasing actually wound up dipping and going underwater as they were chasing it. And he said that, I think they had video of it, and he said he was going to look around to see if he could find the video. And there's also multiple witnesses to this that have not testified before Congress. And I'm sure he's listening, because I know he's a listener to the show. for somebody like him, if he so desired, because I imagine there's a desire part of it as well for people who have experienced this stuff. Like maybe Congress wants to talk to them, but maybe they don't want to talk to Congress. But if he so desired, and him and the guys he went through this with wanted to, what would be the process of even appearing before somebody in the government to talk and testify?
Yeah, it's really easy. Just reach out and call one of our offices. Call my office in Washington, D.C. Um, and let and just let people know that you'd like to tell your story, and that you'd like to be a whistleblower. But it's very easy to reach out.
It's, you make it
It's
sound
just
so
like
easy.
that.
I guess it is. That's
Right.
wild.
Now we will vet people. I mean,
Sure.
as you can imagine, I get some people that come in that tell me that they've got Bill Gates implants in their brain that
Mm.
were, or that Oprah, um, of all people, was helping Bill Gates to implant chips into this person's brain, and you get those kinds of people that come in, and so we will vet, but at the end of the day, um, we'll listen to anybody, and we'll be happy to hear somebody. If you've got a story, please reach out.
Okay. And so with the story that I just shared with you, and it was a whole episode, so I mean, I can't go into all the details, but it to me, what happened that night seems like it was some kind of advanced technology that they stumbled across, seemingly they didn't, at least the guys who were there didn't know what they were going to be stumbling across. What are some of your perspectives on this phenomenon then? Because there's definitely different routes to go with, but obviously one of the more, I guess, main topics of it is the idea that this is some kind of secret technology that's being developed. Is that where you're leaning with this? And if so, like, is it our government? Is it private industry? How do you view what people are encountering?
Yeah. So until somebody brings forward video evidence or photos or some kind of substantial evidence, hopefully the material itself, it's all anecdote, or it's all a story, right? It's someone's perception, and I think that I'm not trying to discount it, but at the end of the day, I can't take that and run with it, and show it to the American people and say, look, this is proof, right? This person saw it, right? So I've got to have some kind of physical evidence. So if you see something, if you got videos, photos, any of that, that's wonderful. I will say, in meeting with Arrow, a lot of what they do, they'll track down, they'll investigate, and they've investigated thousands of these individual stories and incidents, and so many of them have photos and have videos. Arrow, of the thousands that they've investigated, they probably have maybe a couple of dozen that they don't have an answer for, but by far, um, 99.9% of the things they investigate turn out to be something that is either a balloon or a drone or some other phenomenon that's been confused to be. And look, it can easily happen to anybody, but they showed. I sat through two briefings with Arrow where they just went through dozens and dozens of examples. Some of them are some very high profile events that people have taken photos of, and they definitively, in my mind, disproved that it was non-human intelligence, because they were able to explain what it actually was. And so after you go through those, it becomes pretty depressing, because if your belief is that that there is non-human intelligence, there is life out there, that we are being visited. If you're going to go through that experience, it's going to be pretty depressing. For me, I walked out just, with a different perspective than some of my colleagues, and I just felt like, okay, if this phenomenon, and I called our mutual friend Tim Alvarino, we talked about it after one of the briefings, and I said, he said, look, if this phenomenon is real, Arrow's probably right. Probably 99.9% of the things that people interact with is not non-human intelligence. It is but it doesn't mean that there might be that one needle in the haystack out there, or a dozen needles in the haystack that do exist. And that's what I'm doing. I'm looking for these handful of needles. And so what we're trying to track down real locations, real material, and get our hands on the actual program, which is why my request to the White House is to get a full briefing. We're trying to go through the proper channels. In the past, we have been rejected. So the way in which it works, if you're going to get a briefing, Arrow was denied giving us a basically the briefing that is the highly classified, most sensitive briefing on this topic, and they were denied to be able to present that to us. And they were denied when we looked into it. They were denied by our own leadership, so the House leadership. And so what does that mean? That means either the Speaker or the ranking member of the Democratic Party, which would be Hakeem Jeffries, or it would have been the chairman or the vice chairman of oversight, or the chairman or ranking member, I'm sorry, the chairman or ranking member of oversight, or the chairman or ranking member of intelligence or of House Armed Services. Well, we pretty much believe that we were rejected by the chairman or ranking member of the Intelligence Committee at that time. So we're going back through the process now that we have a new chairman of intelligence, and we've got the White House behind us, because when White House staff is working to try to make this happen, and I've got a little bit of hope that we can actually get a little bit more answers than we've had before.
So you're feeling like the White House is still motivated for this?
Yes. Yeah, the White House and the president has been, I mean, he's the disclosure president. He's put in place people like Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio. This administration is a transparent. They want to be as transparent as possible and release as much information as possible.
Okay. Because I mean, that's another thing that I started just wondering, I guess, privately. In fact, this is the first time I've ever said it out loud. I've had some communications with people that aren't ready to be named yet, but I started feeling like maybe the idea of disclosure in general might be getting put on a back burner for, and it could be for various reasons. It may not be just for, hey, we're in now this last term, who cares now? It could be, as simple as, hey, there's a lot of irons in the fire and something needs to get pulled out and put in the water and cooled off a little bit before, we overdo it here. So I just wasn't sure if they were doing that. But if you feel like the disclosure is still part of the agenda and moving forward, that's encouraging. NHI, you brought up NHI, and it's actually kind of fun because you brought up NHI in basically the same commentary of having the physical aspect of things, of wanting to have physical evidence, and that's what we can run with, and I can understand that. Where do you stand on the idea of NHI being a tangible asset to look at? Because it itself, just in the definition, non-human intelligence, like how do you look for something that's tangible as far as that goes? I mean, are you looking for biological bodies?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking for anything that we can get our hands on. I went down to Mexico City, for example, because there were reports that they had this object called the Bugasphere. I went there. At first, I thought, because I just saw photos of it, I saw videos of it, and I thought I was, highly skeptical. Um, but when I learned that there were a team of scientists that had been secured that also contract with NASA. These are highly respected scientists in that community, that they were going down to take samples, and I was invited to go down myself. I wanted to go down and see exactly what samples they were taking, what was their observations of this. So I was there during that event, and look, to me, on first glance, the sphere looks like it was handmade. It does not look like it's made by some advanced civilization. Um, I speculated that, it perhaps could have been made by non-human intelligence. Maybe it's like and I use the example Gilligan's Island, building like Gilligan on Gilligan's Island trying to build a radio with coconuts. Like
Hmm.
it's not precision made, right? But it also is very strange. So I was willing to like have an open mind about it. But where we get the facts and where we get the data is when we get the samples back of the metal that was taken from the sphere, because they can test it and they took enough material that they can determine the origin, the planet, like the if whether the metal on this sphere was originated on planet Earth or was originated on outside of planet Earth, and that will be telling. So we'll be able to get that. Also, they took some carbon dating from the sphere to determine how old it is. So all of that can kind of come into play to determine whether or not this thing actually is non-human intelligence or if it's a fake. And so we have to have that kind of jaundice eye when we're looking at some of this stuff and ask those questions.
So this Bugasphere, when do you have any idea when the testings would come back for that on your end? Obviously, you're going to get the information before we would.
Oh, I don't believe so. I think that they're just going to be very public and transparent with it. And
Okay.
so we'll all find out at the same time, I assume. And it should be before the end of this year.
Really? Okay. And when was that trip for you?
It was a couple of months ago.
Okay. So this is a good example. The Bugasphere, NHI, you brought up the idea, did NHI create this? Your opinion aside, the perspective of those maybe looking at it and trying to tackle the topic of NHI, would they look at the sphere itself as an NHI, non-human intelligence? It's intelligent of its own, kind of like AI is. Like AI is like this non-human intelligence. It's
Yeah.
you kind of look at it as almost like a software or a computer program, but it's its own intelligence. Is that how they're kind of viewing that?
I don't know in this case. I think that we they're going to try to see if the sphere will actually what's on the inside of it, if it's got circuitry, if it's but so far I think we'll know quite a bit from the samples that were taken on the surface.
Okay. And in your meetings about this, has anybody offered suggestions or thoughts on the language that is on this sphere going around what looks like some kind of circuitry imagery?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody's cracked or deciphered that language. Hopefully, people on the internet will be able to crack that code. I believe in the power of the internet sleuths. I
Yes.
think that it's actually the collectively much better and much more effective than a lot of like people that are the most esteemed investigators. I truly think that the internet can figure stuff out.
So it's interesting that we're talking about this. I didn't know we were gonna talk about this, but the language. So from your perspective, for you as a single person, if somebody were to come back to you and say this language is Enochian language, first of all, would you even have an idea what that is, and how would you fit that?
I've heard that. I've heard of that. Remind me what the Nokian language Nokian is.
So I'm not an expert in it, but it's an angelic language. Some would call it a demon language. That is something that would harken back to fallen angel technology being gifted to man and their inscriptions on it. Not a language of Earth, essentially, but from another realm.
Interesting.
I'll tell you, and I understand you are very much, I need the facts, I need the physical evidence and things like that. But I will bring up this other story that I kind of referenced earlier because it kind of pertains to this. I had a guy talk to me, and him and I had been in communication for years, and recently he's kind of dropped off on me. But he was part of some kind of operation. He was serving in our military, and the operation had a lot of layers to it. and things went sideways on this whole thing. But when they got to this, they were being sent out, and he wouldn't tell me where this was. They were being sent out to recover information off a downed aircraft. Now, this is the first time I've heard the Enochian language tied to this. He said that his position in this whole thing, that he was out there with other soldiers, but also scientists, and their job was to get inside, recover information, and then destroy it with thermite. And they did. They did this. But he said when he got inside, his job was to pull data. And on this, like, I don't remember exactly how he described it, but on this, like, the surface of this craft on the inside, maybe a dashboard or something, I don't know. He said that there was a language he didn't recognize. And when he was flipping through a manual they had trying to understand what this language was so he knew how to do things, one of the guys that was more of a scientist came over to him and said, "You're not going to find that in there." And he didn't understand what the guy meant. And he said, "That's Enochian language." And he identified it as a demon language. Now, that's a story that showed up on the Confessionals in 2019. I understand that. But I think for me personally, from my perspective, when it comes to when we're dealing with NHI, as a Christian, by the way, so I want to bring that into the equation. I hear them talking about NHI in these disclosure hearings, and I can't help but to look at it and be like, yeah, I actually agree with these people. I don't know if it's the same direction that everybody else wants to go in, but I have looked into this for years, the idea of fallen angels interacting with mankind and gifting us technology and showing us how to do things. And so is it possible that that's an angle to look at from your humble perspective? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It is. It is. It absolutely is, because I am a born again Christian as well. And that's why after that, listening to that podcast, I reached out to Tim Alberino, and that's how we got connected. And I've read his books, and it's kind of taken me down this trail of kind of rethinking some of the stories in the Bible, and rethinking, like, really the cosmological nature of things, right? And honestly, I can say that's probably strengthened my faith, because it really kind of it creates this. It creates a perspective that God is much greater than we possibly could have imagined, and that the universe is so vast and so huge, and there's so much creation that's involved, and that you have, a hierarchy of supernatural beings, whether it's the divine council um, or whatnot, like that whole spiritual side. It really a lot of times I think that you just kind of, as a Christian, you're focused on the story of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and about the story of the crucifixion and salvation and resurrection. And so but this really kind of creates a bigger picture, that was kind of the culmination of a larger story, an epic story that spanned potentially millions or billions of years, right? And so if you look at it in that perspective, it kind of changes it a little bit. But at the end of the day, to me, what's important is the core part of the story for me, which is that God came down, was man, was sacrificed for our sins, and was resurrected, and is getting ready to, that we will be with God at one point in heaven. That being said, and so with the discussions about there being non-human intelligence, and if you replace that with fallen angels, or good angels, or you've got the whole topic of the unclean spirits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which I've the last few years of studying this, I used to think that demons and fallen angels and unclean spirits were synonymous, that they were the same thing. But I've learned that there is a distinction between those different classifications, and so it does kind of make you wonder. And I'll tell you, I've encountered a lot of people through this process. I've spoken with some people that will tell me that they pray to God and to Jesus, and that they are born again Christian, and that on a regular basis, when they're doing that at night or in an open sky, that they do see phenomenon, that they see UFOs appear and make a display or some kind of presence. I've heard that, but I've also heard stories of people that are not believers who do the exact same thing. And one has to kind of, from a Christian worldview, one has to kind of wonder: is one one individual talking to angel or good angels, and one is talking to fallen angels? It's kind of just bringing me. It brings that into mind for me whenever I'm talking to people. But at the end of the day, as somebody that's on the committee investigating the topic, my response is, okay, if you can do that, show me. Let's go. Um, and I'm just my attitude is, let's go out. I'll be there. You can do your thing. You can pray, whatever you want to do, but and I'll be looking up in the sky. And if you can demonstrate something, that's what I've been waiting for. I've been waiting for some kind of um, physical revelation to occur, but that is yet to happen.
So I'm so glad you said this stuff. So you set the stage. I love it. So and I've heard the same thing. And this is my perspective and my opinion, and I just want to clarify that, not yours. But people who are saying that they're Christians and calling in these, they're doing CE5. They're calling in what they want to call UAPs or spiritual entities in the sky. You're standing on Christ and saying who Christ is in your life, and Romans 10:9. You confess with your mouth, you believe in your heart. It doesn't change the fact that you're projecting something out there, and anything can respond to it, good or bad. And the Bible constantly tells us to not practice divination. When you're doing CE5, you're essentially doing divination. You're calling in you're looking for a spiritual entity. Angels are a spiritual entity, good and bad. So if you're practicing calling in spiritual entities through this divination, the Bible clearly says to not do that. Therefore, when things are responding, I don't think an angel of God is actually going to respond to your divination going against what God has told us not to do. And so when people are out there and they're doing the CE5 protocol, they're on the beach and they're calling it in, I believe that that this is happening. So that's where I'm at, where I believe this stuff is happening. But what I'm saying is, I don't think that, one, as a Christian, we should be doing it. And two, I don't think that if just because you called in an entity and you're saying you're a Christian and the entity tells you something, doesn't mean that it's a good entity because, hey, I'm a Christian. There's a whole mass amount of deception that gets thrown into the pot here when we're dabbling with the idea of calling in spiritual entities. And I believe that's what's happening right now.
It could be. It very well could be. And it's kind of disturbing to me how much, culturally, this is becoming more and more of a topic. And it almost makes you wonder, are we entering like a quickening phase here? Are we entering into like a point of acceleration? Because it certainly feels like there's an acceleration of this that's occurring. I don't know if you would agree with that, but
yeah,
for example, I've had people come tell me that they were never a Christian, never read the Bible, but they are part of this, and they became a believer in Jesus because the entities that are communicating to this individual are telling him that Jesus was real, he was the Son of God, and all that. But my thought also, whenever I heard that, was, well, the angels also, the unclean spirits, the demons also believed in Jesus,
and they tremble.
and had a different attitude about him, but they didn't deny that he existed, right? So to me, I think this topic is extremely, you've got to be very, you really need to have your guard up. You need to put on the full armor of God if you're going to go in this direction, because I think that this is a very dangerous topic that people are entering into.
So I want to offer a perspective. I just want to go back and forth with you on this. So people who come into this idea of accepting Christ in their life because they were doing CE5, I don't even want to say that's impossible or that didn't happen either, because there is a level of advanced deception that can be at play here. What better to have a bunch of Christians who are going out to the beach, calling in entities, saying they're angels from God, and other people coming to Christ because they called in an entity that told them that Christ is real. What a better way to deceive a mass amount of people to get comfortable with the idea of divination, calling it entities and listening to those entities and what they have to say. And we see that, and I don't want to drop names, but we see that in very specific cases where people are in deep communication with these entities now that are guiding them and telling them certain things that are just straight up away from Christ. And so I really feel like what we're seeing is a spilling over into from a spiritual realm manifesting into this realm. What we're seeing culturally and with our own eyes during these situations is spiritual warfare playing out right before our eyes. And the tool of spiritual warfare, one of the major tools, is deception. And I feel like we are part of this this cosmic mass deception that's part of the spiritual warfare. And whether it's part of the UAP topic or naturally, or it's being grafted in for convenience, it's being tied together. And it's very, for me, it's very concerning because at the end of the day, I think our instructions are clear. If something appears before you and tells you something that is against Scripture, you shouldn't be doing it and you shouldn't be following it. And if that thing that appeared before you is telling you something that's scripturally sound, but you called it in, you can't trust the source, because essentially you are the source. You're the one who caused this. In the Scripture, how many times do we see somebody who calls in an angel of God? First of all, I don't know how many that is, but it's probably not that many. Most of the time they're appearing to the people. And the first thing that they say is, be not afraid, because they're terrifying. And this whole encounter of, oh, it's peace, love, and happiness, and it's enlightening me. I'm very hesitant to say that these things are from God. Now, I think that people do have experiences with angelic beings that are from God, but they don't step outside the playbook that God has set before us. And I'd rather not just kind of go rambling on now about that and stuff. But I don't know. With these things, let me kind of backtrack a little bit here.
I think that part of it too is how close are you in relationship with the Holy Spirit, right? So
Yes.
because there certainly are moments where people I believe can cry out to God and God responds. And I have heard those stories. I personally have had experiences where I have had a moment where I felt like God was directly speaking to me. And it was a very still, small voice, right? And I wouldn't dismiss those kind of events that they do not happen. But I think that the part of it is, how close are you to the Spirit, to the Holy Spirit? And because Holy Spirit will, if you're leaning on it, will let you know if it's genuine. And the closer that you are with Christ, and the more that you read the Bible, the more that you will discern what's a lie and what is not.
I 100% agree with you. There's a level of discernment needed, and the only way to have that is to have a close relationship with the Lord, so that you hear His voice. You know, my son's going into second grade this week, and last year he's in first grade, and we're driving to school, and he asked me a question I wasn't ready for at 7:00 in the morning. He said, "Daddy, how do you hear the Holy Spirit speaking?" And I was just like, that's deep for a 7:00 conversation with a first grader. But I told him, and I used this example with him, that the day that we brought his little sister home, he was 3 years old and she was a baby, and he's holding her and talking to her, and she didn't understand a word that he was saying. And I told him, I said, over time, she's in the house and she hears sounds like food. And every time she hears food, something's getting put in her mouth. She hears Ben, his name, and all of a sudden she starts identifying whenever that sound happens, everybody's looking at him. So she learns his name. And I said, the only way to hear God consistently and clearly is to spend time in his presence consistently. So you learn his language, you learn how he speaks, and you learn to hear his voice. And I think with this stuff, it's imperative that if somebody is a Christian, is drawing close to God so that they hear his voice, they know his voice, and they know when somebody sneaks in the back door and starts saying their name, they're like, that doesn't sound like my dad. That's not my dad. I'm not going to listen to that. And so I think you bringing up the sermon is a huge piece of that, for sure. So let me ask you about this. I guess maybe the other side to this, in a sense, where we're talking about NHI, we're talking about the idea of technology, and maybe from another realm. Like, I'm really big on talking about the idea of spiritual warfare and how that might actually be playing out in the second heaven right now, spilling over here. Maybe that's for another day. But is it possible? Like, let's just use this, what we were talking about here, the Bugasphere, the Bugasphere. You mentioned about how it almost looked like it was made by hand. Do you think that there's a chance that, say this seems like it has advanced technology that we shouldn't have access to? Do you think that there's a chance that there's reverse engineering at play here, where somebody, whether it's a government or private organizations, is getting their hands on advanced technology from somewhere else, and they're actually actively trying to reverse engineer such things?
I do. So there have been quite a few whistleblowers that have come forward that make that claim. David Grush has made that claim. Jacob Barber has made that claim. Jacob Barber said that he was on the program to retrieve these objects. And incidentally, what he did say is that 99% of the things that they retrieved were man-made. But on a rare occasion, they retrieved something that clearly was, in his mind and everybody that he was with, was not made by humans. And they take them to a particular facility, is what they've been told. So this is a common trope. Like, I'm hearing this from a lot of different whistleblowers that are coming forward. Some of them are like, you have Michael Herrera, who has publicly stated that he was, working in a different military branch, and they stumbled upon, a contracting group that was retrieving or working with a UAP. So you're hearing this from different perspectives. At the end of the day, there still isn't any evidence. There's no photos, but that does give me an opportunity to then try to work within the federal government and try to get to the bottom of it and try to find out, okay, are there these locations that these guys are talking about where things are being dropped off? Can we figure out a way to get there? Can we figure out a way to secure the location and actually get our hands on some of these devices if they exist? And so at least it gives a breadcrumb trail or some kind of direction as to where we might be able to go to investigate.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, and I'm glad you brought up Michael Herrera, because I wasn't even sure if you were aware of his story in depth, but clearly you are, because he makes some strong claims, during his, I saw the interview that he did with Sean Ryan, and I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but let me just bring it up. We're dealing with the idea of human trafficking in this country and globally, and he, in part of his story, is that the idea that human trafficking being tied to UAP, and I feel like maybe this is even a question as much as more of a comment towards you. Like, it feels like this is a prime example of a layered onion here. Like, we're talking about the spiritual side of this possibility, the physical side of this. For me personally, the idea of biological beings coming from another galaxy visiting us, if with everything else that I look at, I was just like, that's probably lower on the list. But then there's the layer of the onion of using technology that's advanced for the sinister means of, human trafficking or maybe other things. It's really showing how layered and complex this is, and how the lines get blurred and you don't see it. It's hard to see it all clearly. And, as I know we're winding things down here, talking with you here, but also in the Uber, I got to tell you, I walked away from our conversation in the Uber very encouraged, because I really felt like I actually met somebody, because, we have millions of people in this country. Not everybody gets to meet people like you. And I got a chance to meet somebody who's actually working. And I really felt like you were being sincere and honest and trying to track down truth. Not the truth that by Tony or Alberino or the whistleblowers, but just pure, what is this? And I find it very encouraging moving forward here. The human trafficking side of things, if that is true, it just presents a whole other layer to this, where it's like, okay, so now you have advanced technology in the hands of probably humans who are actually working a criminal network to do very sinister things. I mean, I don't even know how you begin to start tackling something like that.
I think you focus on getting to the kernel of what's happening, and then once you reveal that to be true, then all of the other things are now uncovered, and you can start evaluating it and investigating all of the different. To me, that's kind of to me, that would be the more logical path, like pursuing this um, uh, on the human trafficking thing. It's really disturbing if it is true, but at the end of the day, I think that we have more evidence and more tangible evidence towards trying to identify these reverse engineered craft.
So I got one more question for you here. On the governmental side of things, we had the disclosure happening, and I think, for elementary terms, I think there's good guys and bad guys, even in the disclosure realm. And do you see that play out behind closed doors, where it's like there's probably, I mean, from my assumptions, there's got to be a group of people who are involved in this that are trying to tightly spin a narrative to people for them to view it in a certain direction? Or do you feel like there are people that most of them involved are just purely after the truth, like you?
Yeah, this is a good question, but what I've part of this investigation has been me having to learn all of the different factions, all of the different groups, um, and their paradigm, right? Um, they overlap quite a bit. Most of what they say is pretty consistent with each other, and then they really get caught up. It's almost like within the Christian church, how denominations can really split and fracture over a very nuanced perspective of the Bible. This is the same thing with the UAP community. They are extremely hard on each other, and they will go after each other. Sometimes they sue each other, and so that is a whole dynamic. My perspective is I don't want to get involved and pick a side. I just want to talk to everybody, and because at the end of the day, I've got to get to the truth. And if I can pull in as much information as possible, and then I'll be able to figure out and filter through what's true and what's not true. So that's why I just am agnostic as to which group to get involved with, or to not get involved with.
Right. And you know what? Hearing you say that reminds me that you and I have something very in common. And it's you and I, our career paths have us in the public where we're learning publicly. And so at times we're not going to have all the answers. And it requires somebody in our roles to be humble and not ever get to a point where it's like, oh, I know. And more like, let's just learn, take in the information and try to discern it as we take it in. So my parting question to you is a hard left turn, but sir, where are the Nephilim giant bones, man? Like I gotta know. I gotta know because I'm an explorer. I shoot documentaries. I go hunting down mysteries, and
Yeah.
I'm on the hunt for the Nephilim bones. Where are they?
Well, good. Well, then I need to ask you where they are because I'm interested as well. I do think that just from watching some of this, these megalithic, learning more about ancient civilizations, I think Alberino, for example, and all the things you've been saying, I kind of have to I have to agree. What in the world? Why is our scientific community, archaeological community, why are they not trying to figure out how in the world did these ancient civilizations move stones and carve them so perfectly and lift them up mountains that we couldn't do today? That is really when you kind of come to that conclusion that that happened, um, more than 10,000 years ago. That's mind blowing, right?
Mm.
And that kind of really changed it. That should be something that there's evidence right there. Why can't we be investigating that kind of stuff? And so, to me, this like ancient civilization stuff that maybe was like killed off in a cataclysm or multiple cataclysms is an intriguing concept to me. I think that when it comes to investigating the giants, I've had someone that I finally made contact with who is I'm requesting, because what a lot of people have said is that the Smithsonian has access or has these giant bones. And if that's true, that's great because being on the oversight committee, we have direct oversight over the Smithsonian. And so, so I've requested any hard evidence that anybody has, including any hard evidence that the Smithsonian has these, then I'm happy to go take a look. But I will tell you, it's not my priority. And so I just, but I am answering your question.
I will tell you this right now. I will volunteer to be your assistant for free if I get to make it my main priority. So I will drop the podcast for an entire 2 months to be right by your side to help you with whatever. If I can go over there and look in the crates, man.
I think you and Alex Stein, I was on Alex Stein's podcast and he brought this up out of left field as well. But he also said he wants to be there whenever we uncover them in the Smithsonian.
I have been chasing this stuff for a long time. Before I was even a podcaster, I was a truck driver and I roamed the woods on the weekend by myself looking for these mysteries. That's what I did for fun. And so like, I had to bring it up and stuff because I know you and I had talked about it a little bit in the Uber. I really appreciate you coming on and joining me here. And I was very encouraged by our conversation. And I was a little nervous to do the conversation because I know where my brain goes with this stuff. And I was like, man, I hope I don't throw them off. But you did great, and you actually really reciprocated well with some of my commentary because I was thinking to myself as I was saying stuff, I was like, man, I'm probably throwing him some wild stuff right now. But clearly, you've thought about all this stuff, and I appreciate you joining me.
Oh, it's been great. And I hope we continue this relationship and we go down this trail of investigation together.